evening. Are we recording now? Are we live? Yeah. Live on Channel 4. Don't say fork. I said fork. Good evening. Welcome everybody to the March Power Platform virtual happy hour, where we've made a massive grievous error because we realized we should have had one of our guests on in April, and but hopefully she won't hold it. And she's probably really sick of that joke as well also. So this evening we are having a discussion around why Dataverse is not the only fruit, and we're expecting live and spirited debate. So do feel free to post your questions in the chat box. A little bit of code of conduct before we start and before we introduce our wonderful esteemed guests. We do operate a code of conduct for the virtual happy hour, which is that we are a safe space and an open environment that is welcoming to everybody. We ask that you be respectful and patient, and understand that other people have viewpoints that may differ from your own. That doesn't mean one of you is right and one of you is wrong. It merely means that you may view things differently, but we ask that you keep an open mind to the fact that other people may think differently to you, and to be understanding of those differences, and always be kind, respectful and considerate in your comments and replies. If you see anybody on this event displaying any behavior that is outside of that code of conduct or not becoming of a community event, then please let me know and I will deal with it swiftly, unless I am of course the perpetrator, in which case let Chris or Carl know and they will deal with it swiftly. We all know it's most likely to be me, if anybody, so I accept that, but I'm always willing to learn. So without further ado, I would like to move on to having a bit of an intro from our lovely guests. And in the interests of being gender neutral, I am going to say gentlemen first, and ask our good friend Paul to give us a little bit of a précis about his experience with Power Platform and who he is, and one fun fact about his lovely self that nobody would guess in a million years.
Oh gosh, that's a pressure question.
No pressure.
I'll try and think about that while I'm introducing myself. So I got involved with Power Platform really kind of by accident. My old boss, in fact, who works for a very large company, asked me, do you know if it's possible to do X? And I'd messed around a little bit with Power Platform. And so I figured that out. And then I started to figure that out. I'd ended up on the community forums. And then I sort of hung around there and thought, this is a bit of fun. And just continued answering questions on there and got to know Power Automate pretty well. And then I sort of took the knowledge that I'd learned there and started implementing things for customers, and it was quite nice how that worked out, because I learned it by helping, and then I profited from it by what I learned by helping other people. So yeah, that's where I'm at. A fun fact that anybody else wouldn't know. Let me think. I get my back shaved once a month. Waxed, I mean.
Wow.
Would very much like to pass that sentiment on to the current Mr. Mulligan, who flatly refuses to get his back waxed, and it does interfere with the Marmite.
Does it show when you go red on camera?
Mine doesn't. For some reason, I look like I am made of flour today. I don't know why I'm so pale. I'm matching your shirt. No, you don't look red. You actually look nicely tanned. Well done. In winter, that is no small feat. Thank you very much, Paul, for that embarrassing admission. Definitely wouldn't have guessed that. And I would love to hear also from our lovely friend April Dunnam. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into Power Platform, and your fun fact does not have to be about having your back waxed.
Okay, yeah, I was say I don't think my fun fact's going to be quite as embarrassing like that.
The bar was a little bit high on that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so prepare to be disappointed with my fun fact. So I kind of got into Power Platform from, I guess, the .NET and SharePoint space. So I was doing my own consulting business, doing a lot of custom .NET dev and SharePoint development. So I was stuck in this project, and actually had a lot of projects where I had to use InfoPath forms and SharePoint Designer workflows and all of that to do some of this low code automation and business processes, and just really wasn't having a great time with the tools, just making things a little bit complex and thinking there got to be an easier way. And I heard about this thing called Project Sienna, kind of glammed onto it early on, which was the code name for Power Apps there, and started really getting heavily into Power Apps Canvas apps, and then of course Power Automate to replace the InfoPath and the SharePoint Designer workflows that I was doing, and some of the projects with my clients, and been in love with it ever since. And it's just like night and day. Better, unlock so many capabilities and possibilities. So I ended up shifting my consulting business from being primarily focused on .NET and SharePoint dev to being a Power Platform practice, and then getting in the MVP community, and then now leading the Power Platform advocacy team at Microsoft.
Wonderful.
So,
and your non-back related fun fact?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess maybe I've sang on stage at a famous music bar in Nashville called Tootsie's.
Yeah. I am not aware of. I know that Nashville has a massive music scene, but I'm not. It's not a scene that I am massively knowledgeable about. Are we talking like famous Dolly Parton kind of?
Yeah, like every
country
famous
music type.
Yeah, it's like country music, what it's famous for, but lots of rock bands and everything. Like Kings of Leon are from Nashville, for example, if you like rock music. So they kind of got their start there. But yeah, lots of country people are really famous for playing at Tootsie's, like Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson and those type of old country folk.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. No, I definitely would not have guessed that. So, and have you had your back waxed? You don't have
I have not needed to have my back waxed, I will say. It's not been a necessity for me.
Personal. Good. Well, moving swiftly on, tonight we would like to talk about data. And my comment is going to be Dataverse, yes or no? And that's the question I put. Like we obviously had a bit of a discussion earlier on in the week about what we would talk about in this session, and one of the things that I we're just as guilty as anyone else on this forum of maybe giving the impression that SharePoint is less than Dataverse, and in fairness, I actually don't think that's true. I actually am much more. I mean, I've used Dataverse, I've used SharePoint, and I'm equally rubbish with both. So they're of level pegging, really, certainly as far as my ability goes. But the point being that Dataverse isn't always the answer, right? Like, who would like to go first on the bigging up of other alternatives to Dataverse? Don't all speak at once. Probably one at a time, I'd say.
I'll go. It's one of those things that I've seen in the community where quite often someone's built something they might be quite proud of, and that's been in SharePoint, and then they might receive a little bit of criticism that SharePoint really isn't a database and it isn't suitable, and those kind of comments. And those people that say that are not wrong, but the person that's built it isn't really encouraged by that comment, and they're feeling quite proud. I've built this thing. Everyone thinks it's really useful. At the point they've built it, it's actually working fine. And it might be in a future year or 6 months or 2 years, it might start to have some performance issues, and that SharePoint being the data source may cause a problem. But at that time, they're dead chuffed. And I just think good on you. And it seems to me like SharePoint is, your gateway, your easy gateway into building things in Power Platform.
Fair, absolutely fair comment. I had a similar experience where I built something in SharePoint lists, and Chris was immediately quick to tell me it was crap. No, that's not true. I think my perspective is that sometimes we have sometimes we will overkill. We'll use a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, right? Sometimes using an Excel spreadsheet is all that somebody needs. Sometimes using a SharePoint list is all that somebody needs. What I think it's not fair to assume that Dataverse is the only answer to everybody's situations. And I think certainly the thing that we discussed previously is people who are much cleverer than me in building stuff with the technology have a tendency to say, like, this, we can do this really clever thing here, like, oh, if you use Dataverse you can do this really clever thing here, right? And sometimes you can lose sight of what the user actually needs. And I know that I'm always harping on about the same thing, but unless we look at it from a user first perspective, I as a user 9 times out of 10 literally could not, it doesn't make any difference to me what happens behind the scenes. I just need to be able to access my data in a way that is useful and meaningful to me, right? Like, what's your best examples maybe of where somebody is like really gone overkill? Maybe that's a funnier discussion to have.
Well, I would say, like, I don't know if I have like a particular example, but I just see this all the time from people that I talk to, is they just get like in this analysis paralysis of like, well, I need to make sure that I build this out right, and I got to learn Dataverse, and I got to learn how security roles work, and all of this stuff just to get started. And I think there's something to be said for getting out of that mindset and just starting where you're at and the tools that you're already comfortable with. So if you come from a SharePoint background and you already know SharePoint list and permissions like the back of your hand, that shouldn't stop you. Maybe SharePoint not being a relational database shouldn't stop you from using that as a first iteration, because that's one of the things that I think we need to think about when we're building solutions. Is it's not just a one and done, it's an iterative process. You can always continually improve down the road. You can always upgrade that to Dataverse. So I think starting where you're at is key in these situations. And I see too often people just getting stuck in the analysis and thinking that they have to go to the full, ALM supported Dataverse solution master plan from the get-go, and you really don't have to.
Right, 100%. Yeah. And that goes a bit to what you were also saying earlier, Paul, about like, just, look at everybody has to start somewhere. Sorry, Chris, you have your hand up.
I feel like the question probably to ask here to both of you is like, do you see there's a difference in audience in let's say tech from an audience perspective? And I can give you like maybe some feedback from our end, right? So like, if we're chatting to Karen in accounts, like, Karen doesn't give a damn what data source she uses. Seriously, she's like, whatever's SharePoint lists so easy, you can create one with like a few clicks. But then if you chat to I don't know, Tina, who's a pro dev, who's really good at understanding data, often I find that like there's no real middle ground sometimes. Have you both found that at all?
Well, I suppose one of the things I've noticed since being an MVP and being in the WhatsApp group chat is that almost everybody in that space has something to do with dynamics. Now, I've got lots of customers which have got ERP systems, and none of those ERP systems are dynamic. So I need to get that data to Power Platform somehow, and it either ends up in Dataverse or SharePoint, depending on how much data there is. So from my perspective, I work with lots of customers, and all of them, literally all of them, had never even heard of Power Platform before I introduced it to them. And most of them still don't know the term Power Platform. They just see a Power App, an automation. They see the result. They don't necessarily, they're not interested in their technology really. So if it works, they're happy, and if it doesn't work, they call me. And I, if I said to them, should we talk about SharePoint or Dataverse, they would just look at me like I was a stranger.
But quite right too. Like you were saying earlier, like, I from a user perspective, they only care about the result, right? Like, and the thing with Power Platform is it has such a capacity to remove a lot of boring, repetitive work for a lot of people, right? Like that for me is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to a lot of people, is to remove a lot of the drudgy, repetitive stuff that they might do on a day-to-day basis. Or, and like Dataverse actually is a great example of maybe you want to give people one version of data, whereas before people have bits of data stored all over the place. And so, you know, echoing Chris's question is, you know, maybe it's not just about whether it's SharePoint or Dataverse. Maybe it's about the user experience, right? And the users getting what they need out of the systems that are available to them.
Yeah.
So like to that end, you know, is like there's so much available in terms of connectors, in terms of other, you know, integrations that are available. Like you said, Paul, some of your customers have got loads of ERP systems, none of them are Dynamics. There's so many connections available across all of the Power Platform tools that thinking about things just in terms of, you know, having one way of building things, I think is quite a narrow view. Yeah. Carl, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, really, it's there is Power Virtual Agents, for example, that we just don't care. We know that it's stored somewhere, but why do we care? And we know we can interact with it somewhere, but and an approval process, for example, you know, the dynamics is the data's there if you really want to go to the nitty-gritty about the levels of accuracy, but like you were saying, it's down to that user experience, and the Power Platform is great at providing those tools that are wider than the old Dynamics 365 back end to allow us to interact with a lot more things. And I think mostly it's down to the negativity that people seem to have around SharePoint as a data source, or Excel or Access, etc. But they were tools that fitted a niche, right? They were tools that were available to people, and probably the only tools that were available to them, because of cost, because of years ago we didn't have things like Dynamics and Dataverse and etc. And the cost of bringing in SharePoint versus the cost of bringing in Dynamics is really a stumbling block for a lot of people still on a wide range of issues. But I think Power Platform in general is accessible and available. It just depends on which bits of it you want to access.
So what's the opinion on Dataverse for Teams? Chris looks like he needs to answer this.
Oh, he's gone.
Yeah.
Mate, I just went off.
That was
I
how
just went
much
off camera. So the cool thing is, I'm not an MVP. So, okay, I cannot understand how people think it is a scalable solution. Okay, I think that it works for the odds and sods solutions, but like for me, every time I test it, it breaks. So like,
but is that you with your enterprise hat on, Chris?
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, man.
You work like I do for a large consultancy that are used to large problems.
Why does
you were
DFT
working for
exist?
a 2 or 3 man shop?
But then you SharePoint.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. It is an opening up of the platform that we shouldn't be saying go and do it in Dataverse.
No, the point that I'm trying to make here is that I think with DFT, Dataverse for Teams, I feel like I would rather do it in SharePoint. Like I've built way more scalable solutions on SharePoint lists than I have in Dataverse for Teams. I just don't find the whole way of creation as easy as I do, especially with actually doing the modeling. Like I actually find it difficult. With SharePoint, when I was chatting to Paul Cumsey, like he actually swayed me on the whole SharePoint argument, right? And we spoke about a couple of things, and he actually it became very apparent to me that actually that's the answer for me from whatever perspective you're looking at it. DFT for me solves one problem, and that's when you have a lot of users that need to access data that needs to be a bit more secure than in SharePoint. And actually, you know what? Like with the new licensing model, it's just a bit different, right? So for me, I don't find it scalable. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
I would agree, but like I think probably what I would like to achieve with tonight's session is just if we can remove some of the stigma around using different solutions, right? Like if we can just remove some of the I was going to say snobbery, but I don't think it is snobbery. Like I think everybody wants to be like really tech first, right? Because we work in a tech environment, but like that doesn't mean that you have to use the most high tech thing for like every possible in every possible way. Like yeah, Dataverse may not be accessible to some people, like in the way that SharePoint List is. SharePoint List is super easy for a non-technical person to understand. It kind of just, I was about to say something really terrible. Don't hate on me for it. It's kind of like a stylized Excel spreadsheet, right? Realistically, but you can do a bit more with it. But Dataverse, I feel, probably isn't quite as accessible to non-technical people. And I think, again, like you mentioned, if you've got like a 2-man band or a 4-man band or something, and they're just trying to achieve a little bit of automation, with a Microsoft 365 license, which is 5 or 10 quid or whatever it is a month, they could get, you know, some stuff going in Power Automate with a SharePoint list that probably gets rid of an awful lot of drudgy work that they're doing, and that's right for them.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, I truly believe like every data source option that we have, there's a time and a place for it. And there's so many extenuating circumstances and variables that will come into effect to affect that decision. Just as you mentioned, it could be a cost issue. It could be just like, do you even have access in your company to the certain tools? You might not have access with that, so you got to make do with what you have until you can move on to something else. It could be, I mean, something really simple. Like if I'm recreating, so what's a fun app that I just built? I rebuilt Wordle inside of Power Apps. I didn't need Dataverse for a simple personal game application. I, don't hate me, used Excel because all I need to do is import a word bank from Excel of words to guess, and all I needed to do was store some user profile settings in Excel for personal use. So there again, there's a use case for Excel, there's use cases for SharePoint, and even Dataverse for Teams. Yeah, is it scalable? Well, I think the thought here, at least in my opinion, is if you need to scale Dataverse for Teams, you're moving to Dataverse for your solution, right? That's the scalability of Dataverse for Teams. But there is that kind of sweet spot for building in Dataverse for Teams when you really want a team, you want to build an app to be consumed in Teams, but you don't have a traditional development background to build a native Teams app. So what can you do? You can leverage Power Apps and the Power Platform for that, have some, you know, middle of the ground security and scalability layer kind of built in there for that, for kind of departmental lighter weight use cases. So I think truly, and there could be a case where, you know, SharePoint might be a better alternative for that, depending on what you're trying to do. It just really is kind of a unique and personal choice of what your circumstances are, what your comfort level is, and what kind of team you have accessible to. I mean, ideally, I think the ideal scenario is you're going to have a Fusion development team. You're going to have a team of database administrators, DBAs. You're going to have a team of business analysts and, you know, .NET devs and business users and everyone working together so that you can create the most scalable and biggest impact solutions. But not everyone has that. So you got to come to where they are and then, yeah, kind of get rid of the what judgery or whatever you refer to it as, but behind the choices of data sources, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, getting rid of the stigma and getting rid of the snobbery or whatever it is that you want to call it. It's not snobbery, is it? I don't know what the right word is. I agree with you 100%. Anything to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest shame in Power Platform is when the SQL connector became premium, because
yeah, Stacey mentioned that in the chat.
Because that is where, as much as people love Dataverse, Chris, you know, there is a billion SQL databases out there with value that you could by getting access to that. I mean, we can still get access to it, we just have to pay for it. But you know, I can't think of a customer that I know that doesn't have a SQL database somewhere holding something really valuable to them, which would be just juicy to get at. But if it's going to cost X amount per person just to reach it, then it makes it a little bit more difficult, depending on the application and the value that it provides. But
do you think that was a conscious decision, though, that was basically over driving people to a Dataverse for Teams, you know, back to those roots, that they made that a premium? Yeah,
for sure. Because
I don't expect April to answer that. But
it's a good point. Like, it's a great point, though. Like Stacey said in the chat, everybody got hooked with having the SQL connector, and then like you ended up having to pay for it. It became premium, and like you say, you could connect to so much more. But like that's one area, right? And not every customer that's using Power Platform is a massive customer with an ERP system. Right, there's lots of much smaller companies that are able to benefit. Like, not everything that people are doing on the platform is being done by giant organizations with massive amounts of people. There's plenty of people that don't have any CRM, that don't have any ERP system, that have literally nothing except for like, oh, let's move on to Office 365 so that we can have our emails in the cloud and work from and Teams and work from home. And then they suddenly realize they've got this whole world of available technology to them, and it's made a huge difference. It made a huge difference to their organizations, even if it is just being able to update a spreadsheet without somebody saving it on their desktop and like everybody having the current version of it. So I think like apart from the SQL connector, was there anything else? Like, I feel like there was something else that was massive and you used to get it for free and it's gone completely.
Alison, the thing is, okay, and like this is where I will debate. Nothing's free.
Let's have a mass debate.
Yes, let's do a math debate. Nothing is free. Okay, let's just get that out the way, right? If you think you're getting something for free, you're giving data, you're paying something, right? And that's the whole point. And like I say to folks all the time, when people complain about the fact that, oh no, they have to pay for this in the platform, I'm like, well, you sure should be paying for it in the platform because it is a tool that you're using. It is a tool. You don't go to a car mechanic and expect them to fix your car for free. No. The thing is, though, in the Power Platform, when you're looking at working in seeded solutions within your Microsoft Office stack, did you buy Microsoft Office to send one email or create one Excel document? No, you didn't. You bought the Office stack to create multiple things. It just so happens that personal productivity and team productivity solutions are baked into that stack. Okay. When you look at using it wider, yes, there is a charge. And when you start breaking down the charge, I'm going to try and do this as fast as I can. When you start looking at the way that Microsoft charges, it's only two ways. You only ever pay two types of license, connectivity or consumption. Okay. They are very different departments in Microsoft. The consumption people from SQL don't share their money with the Power Platform people. Power Platform have to maintain that connector that links up to SQL. So the moment that the moment SQL changes, it's not the SQL folks on the line, it's the Power Platform folks. So we got to pay big shiny bucket loads of earth money to make sure that we do have that integrity within the platform. No one's going to do it for free. If you go to Mendix, OutSystems, any low-code, no-code provider in the world, that stuff is going to cost you a lot more than what Microsoft are charging. So just to wrap that up in a tiny little bow, sure, it does suck that they put the SQL connector on in premium and that we have to pay for it. But it doesn't suck because now it's maintained and it's looked after. And we have all sorts of cool things that are coming, like implicit and explicit connectivity. You didn't have that before. Now you do. Okay. So, hoorah, I'm happy to pay my $15 or whatever it is and get my explicit connectivity through SQL because that really helps me. So yeah, that's just normally I do that rant in about an hour and a half. So I've tried a lot,
Well, we appreciate you being succinct with it this evening, Chris. When I said free earlier, I don't mean free. I mean things as in there was something that you used to get in with your license, with your Microsoft 365 license, that then like the SQL connector became a separate premium thing, and it's gone completely out of my head, but it will come back to me before the end of the thing. What are best alternatives? Or maybe the question for Paul and April is, what is something you've seen done with either a data connector or some other connector to Power Platform that was maybe a bit left of center, or just like you were impressed or amazed that somebody got it working? Like, what's the weirdest thing you've seen, maybe?
Shall I go?
Go.
Yeah.
So, I don't get impressed by any of it. I'm impressed by what I mean is, I am impressed by how impressed my customer is. So,
okay,
I don't care. But recently, I did a job for a customer. Excel was the data source, and it was a process that took them about 4 days a month. And so this was a Power Automate thing where they had to plug some data into an ERP system. So I wrote this automation. It was part Power Automate desktop. And once I sort of got it working, I just left it running, went off, made a coffee, had some toast, came back. And I thought, oh, yeah, it's done. So I emailed them and said, yeah, that's all done now, blah, 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 blah. And they emailed me back saying, just out of interest, how long did it take? And I said, well, I didn't time it, but I think about half an hour. And they replied back saying, oh, my God, that takes us 3 or 4 days.
They were like Bill and Ted, like.
So, like, I wasn't that impressed by it because I'd just done it myself, so I saw it come into life. But from their point of view, they were like amazed, and that's just an Excel spreadsheet and a Power Automate desktop. So, that's a big deal.
But that's entirely it, right? Like that was what the customer needed. They needed something done. It doesn't matter that it's not using Dataverse or anything else really clever. They had something that they're doing, and you've improved their lives immeasurably, well, to the tune of 4 days a month by that piece of automation. So yeah, awesome story. I really like that. April, any other examples from you?
I think I'll just chime in too. So there's something to be said. There's obviously the kind of tabular data storage stuff we can use, like SharePoint, Excel, and Dataverse and SQL. But there's also lots of needs to be able to integrate with internal systems. So if you already have some kind of API, or maybe it's an external API, I mean, that's the biggest kind of use case that I've seen for really making extensible applications that can even modernize legacy apps, is through custom connectors and integrating with APIs that way, and really made easier with the independent publisher connector program, kind of open sourcing in a way, the building and the development of the connectors to have those in product. So I think that's kind of the biggest outside of Dataverse kind of integration data path that I see is through the connector model.
Cool. I know that Chris wants to touch on the governance side of things a little bit as well. Do you have anything specific?
It's actually, so since coming to Avanade back from Microsoft, the thing that I noticed, it's quite cool actually. So with a lot of the folks we're chatting to, they assume initially that, okay, we say, okay, listen, Dataverse is really good to have as part of your environment strategy. And they're like, oh, no, we don't want to store stuff in Dataverse. I'm like, well, don't worry. You and half the world don't. You're good. However, you do get the ability to manage things like application lifecycle management, security, okay, all sorts of other funky things. Creating an environment with or without Dataverse costs you a gig anyway, right? And it's whatever, right? It's going to cost you a gig. So you can actually use the security roles to an extent, lock down Dataverse and use the ALM functionalities, the security. Also, every environment that you implement, don't know if you knew this, if it doesn't have Dataverse, it's not backed up. So it's pretty interesting, right? So if you go to your customers, and I don't know if either April, Paul, you're both seeing this, but if you go to your customers, do you find that they already are immediately apprehensive, or have you tried to explain the governance piece to them about like what is optional with Dataverse?
You go first, April.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't really. It's been a while since I had to have those conversations directly with customers for sure. But I mean, yeah, it does come up. I don't know if Paul has any more recent relevant experience with how he tackled handling the conversations.
Well, I haven't had the conversation because I don't have customers capable of asking the question. Again, back to my previous, they just don't care. They're in a situation where they're the consumers of the application that I built. Now, quite oftentimes that application is built in Dataverse, so I don't really have to make a lot of discussion about it. But more often than not, the data is coming from their on-prem environment anyway, and sometimes going through a it's gone out of my head, a transformation, where we
ETL, yeah,
and then ending up in a Dataverse for Teams.
Okay, so I'm gonna pitch this back to you guys, right? I feel like us not talking to our customers about this is bad practice, and I'll tell you why. It's not because lack of knowledge or whatever. I feel like the folks that we talk to, when Claire and I go out and do our random rampages of the platform, often they don't know. I mean, we sit with customers and they have no cooking clue. And they're like, oh, cool, we've got like 65 environments. And I'm just saying this randomly. I'm throwing random numbers. It could be one or whatever. And then, it doesn't align with their strategy to actually protect things like from a backup perspective. So I feel like we should be bringing this stuff forward and we should be talking about it. And from a strategic perspective, when you look at where Microsoft are going with the product, regardless of whether we're SharePoint lovers, Excel lovers, Dataverse lovers, SQL lovers, the fact of the matter is that there are tools in the platform that are playing an integral part from a governance perspective that we need to know, we need to be talking about. And if we're not, I think we should, like today. And that's not me calling anyone out. I'm just saying, as a general consensus, people just don't know what they don't know, right? And there's not a lot of blogs on this either, by the way.
But that's always the case. Is the customer doesn't know what the customer doesn't know?
Yep.
Like that's a blanket thing, right, for every customer. Carl, you look like you were trying to say something, but I can't hear you.
I think he's still fighting with the dog.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. It's talking to the dog. Yeah, you should always make the assumption that the customer doesn't know this stuff, right? And so you and Lucy were talking about this in the chat earlier. 100%. It is a responsibility for the consultants to go into the customers and explain to them what they don't know. But the people on these calls are not just people that work for partners. Like, some of the people on these calls are working for end users and small companies, and they're coming here to learn about Power Platform. So it's also the responsibility to have this conversation so that everybody in the community hears this conversation and knows that it's not just Dataverse, and we don't just plug Dataverse for the sake of plugging Dataverse, that actually there's a lot behind. There's a lot of good reasons to use that, depending on what your use case is. And like you say, Chris, educating the customer on what's available, why it's available, and why it might be a good idea for them, right?
And remember, when I say customer, I don't just mean somebody that's buying Power Platform.
Right.
There's a lot of internal IT departments and people that are business technologists that have customers internally in their business, right? And as an example, I always say to folks, anyone I'm working with is my customer. Yeah. Can I switch this around real quick?
Always.
Because I'm trying to get like a state of the nation as far as where people are working, and also the type of maturity of the solutions that you're all seeing being built. Because like April, I know you a bit better than I know Paul, right? So I kind of have an idea, but are you both seeing? I'm gonna throw this. I'm gonna use an app, right? Because everyone knows what an app is. I don't want to use Automate or whatever, because apps are nice and visual and you can see the consequences or the results depending on what you're doing. But let me give you a scenario. So found an app, Canvas app, built on top of a number of SharePoint lists, obviously to as best practice as possible, moving data from SharePoint up into collections, preloading, variable structure was obscene, no concurrent. I'm really not kidding when I say 1,400 controls on the screen. Okay, one screen. Yeah. And I think there were, the number of lists underneath it was also insane. I can't remember the number. I'm not even going to try, right? And they called me up and they were complaining about the fact that this app wasn't performing. And I said, well, have you thought about like splitting it out? First things first. But I think what I'm trying to figure out is, I'm not talking about random, I'm talking about complexity. Do you often find that people try and bend the pole a little too far for the E3 license or E5 license, and then maybe like think about potentially moving up into the other stacks? Like, do either of you have those conversations? And I'm pretty sure you've got some war stories.
Yeah, I for sure do, especially back in the consulting days. So that was very common place, just like really pushing the limits of what you can do with the seated license in the Power Platform, especially I had similar experiences where I've brought into several different companies, and they show this monolithic Canvas app with maybe 50 SharePoint underlying list, and also Excel, and then SQL too, and just mix and match of hundreds of different data sources and thousands of records and really slow load times and all that. And like, how do we fix this? What's the issue? And I think that's a lot more common than we suspect, to really push the limits of the stack. And I think that's ideally where you would kind of get ahead of the game on that and realize when you're starting to add 100 different data sources and 1,400 controls on a single screen, that probably goes against some of the guidance out there on performance, that we might be pushing the limits and might need to split it out or look at something else. But yeah, that's a conversation I've had far too many times. Tons of war stories I could go on about forever with that.
And go on, Paul.
The situation that I've come up with a lot is where almost every customer has got someone that's like an Excel guru. And Excel is like the original low code. Someone in the business has built this report or this app or they've stuck a bit of VBA in. And then after a time, the problem comes and they want me to have a look at it and see if I can build something that will be more scalable and easy to use. And my problem starting point is that I have to say your ability with Excel is so far beyond mine, because you've been using it 25 years every single day. Just for me even to comprehend what this thing does is going to take me quite a bit of time before I can then even begin to form some kind of solution. And so, I mean, when we're in this Power Platform community and we're all about that, sometimes I think we forget there are still so many more people out there building things in Excel. And there seem to be, or I've just got bad luck, so many of these Excel gurus around that just that make the most complicated Excel spreadsheets ever, that they do work, but they become so unbelievably difficult to maintain that the better they get and more sophisticated, the deeper and deeper the Excel hole becomes. And some of these people are getting near the Earth's core. that hole is dug so deep.
They've almost gone through to Australia.
Yeah.
Carlos, you put your hand up.
But yeah, so I'm working with a customer at the moment that is doing both extremes of that. So we're looking at replacing Excel spreadsheets for business critical activity with Dataverse for Teams, I think, or maybe SharePoint list. But we're also looking at where Dataverse falls down because of the requirements for the uptime and the SLAs, etc., at the very other end of the spectrum. So we've had to do a lot of work to decouple portals, etc., from Dynamics, just because it doesn't meet our requirements at the other end, and this is the same customer, this is the same entity, but because of the breadth of it and the number of people in it, you get pockets of shadow IT doing all the Excel spreadsheets and all that sort of thing that and users like Paul you were mentioning that have got this very, very complicated way of doing things and building out applications, and it's been running, and why shouldn't it continue? And there's no reason why it shouldn't, really, apart from it's not, but the security, etc., and not being in a place that's secure. And at the other end, you've got people that are wanting those very business critical apps that are customer facing to be more robust than what Dataverse can provide. And I think that's the spectrum, right? And Dataverse for Power Platform goes across that. And that's what we've got to realize, is that there is a piece for everyone in this Power Platform. And just because it's been brought up out of this Dataverse D365 thing doesn't mean that's the answer to all our questions.
That's entirely, like, I'm going to admit now that I am someone that came into technology via the joy of Excel and Access, so I'm possibly the worst case scenario of everything here. But like, I'll give you an example. I was trying to build a Power BI report on the dashboard in my D365 instance, which is a D365 instance that obviously I did not build and is provided.
I've told you not to touch things.
I learned very quickly, because there are certain reports that I produce for our board every month, and I just wanted, at the moment, what was happening is I was having to go into Dynamics, get this data, and then put it into a spreadsheet to make the report, which is obviously bananas. And so I did the first easy thing, which was to have a spreadsheet that was created from an export from Dynamics, right? That I could just update. I could just refresh the data on it, but it doesn't work, and it breaks every month. And so then I go, okay, well, that's fine. Let's build a Power BI report and have it as soon as I could have it on the dashboards in CRM. I was like, well, this is perfect. I'll just have it in here. And then it was absolutely nightmarish to get the data I wanted out of my Dynamics. And so all I did was I fell back on the skills that I already knew I had, which was carry on using Excel and building the report from the data myself, because honestly, it was just easier because I understood how it worked. And it didn't require me to make a support call every month when I was trying to get the data together. And I think that is a reasonably typical example of somebody really trying to use the Power Platform and the technology that's available, and it just maybe not quite working that well. Or like, you know, sometimes it's just you have a level of comfort with the stuff that you already know. And so like it can be really difficult to pull people away from using Access or Excel. And, you know, maybe you don't always have to do that, perhaps.
It's like going to a new air fryer, probably.
Oh, don't. I'd have to, oh God, if I threw my air fryer out, I'd have to lean against the cooker as a wave of guilt went over me or something. It's just steady myself. Just thinking about it then. It's like I cheated on it or something. It's just thinking about it. I thought about buying a rice cooker and then I felt guilt about my Instant Pot. So yeah, it's just...
That's funny. Actually, I've got to go for it.
No, go on.
I've got a great one now, because you were the one that opened the box. I'm just telling you. Okay, this is not my fault. So I'm actually interested now, because quite recently on LinkedIn there was a debate about Access. Okay. I'm going to leave it at that, because I know Paul will absolutely love that thread. If he finds it, I'm going to be quite interested. But here's actually something I'd like to know. Just a random question. So obviously with Access consisting of back end and then the thing in the front, what I've found is that a lot of folks, I mean, they were talking about using Access as a data structure with a Power App on top of it, right? Now, look, I'm not going to say anything out of turn. It's really hard for me to do that. But has anyone ever encountered that, like replacing, like building the app on top of Access, or vice versa, having an Access front end on something else? I don't even think you can do that.
I don't. How would it even work?
I don't know. I'm just interested.
Is this because Access has just been given the functionality where it can link to a Dataverse table?
Yes,
Okay.
That's exactly where it came from.
So you could build a form or report in Access that would link to Dataverse. So I'm going to get ready for you to slate.
I remember this thread.
And it's fine.
No. I'll take it, man. I'll take it.
No, I'm going to be the one that takes the slating. So I was having a discussion with somebody on Twitter. It might have been you, actually, going on and on about how good. No, it wasn't. Going on and on about how good Dataverse is. And it happened to be that a couple of weeks before, I was helping somebody with something that had an Access front end and a SQL backend. And a certain set of circumstances came around, and I came up with this scenario. I said, what would you do in Power Platform if you had, let's say, 15,000 customers, and all you wanted to do was send each one of them a statement of account? So you would have a PDF statement of account, and it needs to go out to them on a PDF. And the best response that anyone came up with, because in Access, you could do that easily. You could generate a report that would generate one per customer, fire it out on an email, and they'd all go. And the best answer anyone came up with is build a portal and have the customers come. And I'm like, people aren't going to come and chase their own bills. That's not how credit control works. You got to tell them what they owe you. And so I thought a little bit about it, and I sort of played with it in Power Automate. Not fast enough. You can't spend 3 days sending a statement out. So I'd be interested to. Access is not as bad as people make it out to be. It's old technology, but it's been very powerful for a very long time, particularly with SQL backend.
Is it old, or is it trusted? Is it reliable?
Well, it isn't that reliable unless
it's not that reliable. I've had to straddle my a couple of Access databases here and there with the platform, and what I can tell you is that honestly, Paul, it's a good use case. So what we found is that, think of, this is going to sound terrible. If these Access folks are on the call, I'm dead. So the way that I see it, right, is that the way that an Access guy explained it to me was that see Access as the kind of side roads that come off a main highway. Okay. And he said, look, Karen in accounts loves her Access data structures. Okay, but she's using them. The moment you have an Access data structure that's like, okay, I don't even know if this will work, but it won't, but proper org-wide stuff, you're going to get locks and everything's going to break. And I've seen it. I mean, I've had to fix loads of those, right? I feel like you can't microservice every Access database you find. It's not going to work, right? But you can microservice a lot of them. And you can start plugging that data into lists and things like that and building the app layer on top. I just feel as if from an Access perspective, I don't feel like it's a technology that's going to be existent in the next X years.
But the biggest problem with Access is deployment. But in terms of the reliability, you can have different backends. So once you've outgrown your Access backend, you can have a SQL Server or a MySQL or Postgre backend, and suddenly it will become highly scalable and performant. The problem is the deployment of it. Is that in Power Platform, we got these nice apps that we just go and consume via the web. Access, you got to have the runtime or Access application and deploy it, and every time you update it, it needs to be sent out to everybody again. But it's often underestimated, in my opinion.
Which is where we were with CRM, right? Back in, things just evolve into an evergreen world, into a the whole COVID thing has made people really realize what legacy systems they've got and really appreciate the fact that their companies run off an Access database that's sat on Jill's computer in finance. And I think that's just the way of the world, that things move on, and we're not all using those green screen applications for finance.
We were all on AS400 systems not that long ago. I'm not that old. I remember that stuff. And like the reality is,
you are old though, Alison.
Yeah, I am old. Yeah, take that. And I'm proud of it. The reality is, maybe in a few years' time, in several years' time, we talk about CRM the way we talk about Access now.
Stop it.
I know. Controversial. But the problem is, for years, everybody's been told that having a CRM is going to run their business better, but actually it doesn't. That's not what it does. It's a journal. It's just a means of keeping a record of what you've done. It doesn't drive anything.
People run your business better, not CRMs.
Correct. 100% correct. So, and the beauty of the Power Platform is it empowers people to run your business better. Like, it can use the data in your CRM or your Access or your Excel or whatever to enable people to do better, do their job better, run their business better, right? And so we've come full circle. Like the circle of life. Closing thoughts in the last 5 minutes. So I feel like we covered nothing except we certainly haven't answered the original question, which was Dataverse, yes or no.
Well, there's not a binary answer to that, is there?
Well, it depends.
I might push you for a binary answer.
It depends. It's that classic Microsoft. It depends.
God, you know what? I find myself answering it depends to almost everything. Yeah. Terrible. But yeah, I think I would just like to see, as we all agreed, less snob. I'm going to use snobbery again. Less snobbery against non-Dataverse connectors and sources. Like, because you know what? Like, there's a whole variety of things that are available to you in Power Platform, and like, it's about finding the right tool. For me, it's about finding as minimum amount of tools and expense possible to get a really good result, right? And ultimately, like Paul has said on many times this evening, it's all about the result for the customer, like what makes their life better, and being user-centric. Because like, literally, I don't care what happens on the back end of something. I just want to know if it makes my life easier on a day-to-day basis, right? Any closing thoughts, April?
Yeah, just echoing what you said. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for every type of data source we have. So sometimes Dataverse is the answer. Sometimes another data source might be the answer. And I think it all comes down to just being a kind human being and understanding that everyone's coming from different places. And you can all have your own opinions and feel strongly about them, but publicly, bashing one data source over the other isn't going to do anyone good. It's not going to foster community. And so we should just share our opinions and why maybe like Dataverse might be a better answer, and like blog posts and the content we put out and what we talk about, but don't discourage other people from using the data choices that they choose, because we don't know the reasons behind it.
Beautifully put. That was awesome. Thank you. Any closing thoughts from you, Paul?
I thought about it carefully, and I've decided to go back to Access and not use either SharePoint or Dataverse.
And Excel.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna just Access for me from
Just
now.
Access, no Excel. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, with your Access skills and my Excel skills, Paul. You know,
We could do
maybe
great things.
We could do wonderful things.
Guys are making me uncomfortable.
Does it make you edgy? Does it make you like itchy around the edges when you
It
think
does.
about it?
Actually, I started scratching my neck, and then I pictured Paul waxing his back, and then it was all fine.
I have to say, this episode is going to go down for me as one of my favourites, just for that share right at the beginning from Paul. I think that was our best.
That was
It
the
is definitely
icebreaker.
best, yeah.
It was our best fun fact to date.
Yeah.
I have to say.
I thought some really good ones after that as well, and I was kicking myself.
I love the fact that that was the one your mind went to first. It's like,
I was
what's a fun
surprised.
fact.
Yeah, we didn't see any like Kelly Clarkson memes in the chat when you shared that.
Oh,
You know, from
God. Oh, that's a real
That's what I
opportunity
pictured.
missed. Yeah, that's a real missed opportunity right there. Oh, I'm disgusted with myself for not taking advantage of that, quite honestly. But anything else you'd like to add, Chris or Carlos, before we wrap up for this month?
No, just to say thank you, both of you. Have been really intriguing and interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks both. I've always wanted to be on a call with Paulie, and I've chatted to April loads, but yeah, with Paul it's been different. I was excited about this.
April's
Yeah.
sick of you. She's had.
April's done, man.
Yes.
She's in too many groups
She's
with
had
me.
enough of you already. Yeah. So all that remains then is for us to give a lovely round of applause and a very warm thank you. Very much appreciated, April and Paul, for joining us this evening and giving us your opinions. If you guys would like to connect with or follow either April or Paul, their details are on the screen and also in the chat for your incredible convenience. And all that remains is for me to say another thank you to April and Paul, and thanks as always to Chris for bringing the debate, and Carlos for being the glue that holds us all together, and looking very radiant this evening, Carl. And that's smashing, charming blouse you're wearing. So on it wasn't International Women's Day today, unfortunately, but because I could have taken advantage of. Never mind. I'm going in one direction now. So,
Oh, you're a lolly.
on the, you can edit that one out at the end, Carl. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Who have we got next month? Who are we annoying next month? You're on mute, Carl.
Yeah, we're doing certification with Julian, Charles,
Of course.
and Victor, I believe.
Yes, Victor and Julian. Yes, I'm very much looking
that's
forward
cool.
to that. We can have Julian is my favourite white bearded person, I have to say.
Gandalf was going to be super upset with you.
Gandalf doesn't even know me. Gandalf doesn't even recognise the existence of the state of Mulligan, so I don't care what he thinks, realistically.
Shame.
Thanks very much for joining us,
Thank
everybody.
you.
You're more
Let's
than
stop
welcome.
recording.
We're gonna stop recording, so if you want to come on to the thanks, Elliot.